tools for our journey, because got it. Okay. So these are some of the tools we need to keep going. See, and I'm gonna try to. How do I get rid of all the pictures? Everybody's.
Mute, maybe.
Pardon?
Should we mute? Oh,
Yeah,
no,
that might be. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Okay, because I was. All right, then. I'm gonna keep going with this. So, because any retreat requires us to kind of shut off all the distractions. And sometimes they're not just distractions, they're our everyday activities. We have to kind of calm ourselves down and listen to God. And it's not always easy because we get worried about a lot of stuff. And you got to kind of just quiet ourselves down. And so listening means giving our attention to someone, and in this case is God. So to listen, what's happening here? Okay. So to listen to God means to do what he says, because that comes from the word for obedience. To audire means to hear. And the Oba used to say it was because, but anyway, it's obedience is listening to God. Yes, I have a step nephew. He's 5 years old, and he's the cutest little thing. But my sister, who was a second grade teacher for about 30 years, she said he's very disobedient. So, and because he doesn't get it that he has to listen. Because the first day I saw him a couple of weeks ago in South Carolina, there was an empty plastic bag, and I said, as soon as the kid saw the bag, he put it over his head. And I said, because every time you open a plastic bag, it's printed to get it out of the way of little kids, and that was a live presentation of what that warning was all about. Because this little kid, does what he wanted to do, and he almost killed himself. But nobody was around, but all of us made sure we got that off his head. But sometimes we can be just as stubborn as a 5-year-old when it comes to listening to God. So how do we know when it's God speaking? So it's this conformity. Is it conforming to God's will as we know it? And is it calling us to change, conversion? And is it always the same message? Confirmation, we find something that says, yeah, this is really true. And we have to be convicted of that. We know this is God. So Jesus wasn't one way yes and another way no. He was never anything but yes. That's what St. Paul, our patron, tells us. And this is called encourage conversion, because God tells us in Exodus, be holy, for I, the Lord, your God, am holy. Because sometimes in our society, there's an allergy to holiness. It sounds weird to say in a public forum, about being holy, to talk about that, because it sounds like it's something strange, alien, and it's true. Our society is very secular. And when I was in South Carolina, oftentimes we had to eat at Shoney's. It's one of the chain restaurants in the South, and almost invariably there'd be Baptist people around, and they would stop and pray out loud. And to me, that they really heed that call to holiness, that they put God first. And how many of us Catholics will go to eat in a restaurant and we maybe bless ourselves, but we shouldn't be afraid, because God's calling us to be holy all the time, in public or in private. So we consistently hearing this from God, and He speaks in familiar ways, in ways we recognize, and He speaks, you know, it in ordinary ways. That's because I found some people that they only want to hear something that's dramatic, that's you know, it's couched in a lot of fancy language, or it's like something you see in the old Cecil B. DeMille movie, something really bombastic and full of pictures in it. But sometimes, like in the Old Testament, remember there is, I think it was the prophet Isaiah. He was listening for God, and it was in the little noise, like the water dripping in his ear, practically. That's where he heard God. He doesn't always speak in loud ways. He's kind of nudges us. So what confirms that God is talking to us? So these are the fruits of the Spirit, and we know that these are from Galatians. Paul tells us that's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And that word love keeps showing up all the time, and that's what we're going to be judged on. And in Matthew 25, Jesus says, what you did to the others, you did to me. And that's kind of a call to wake up sometimes, especially if you feel cranky, you don't feel good some days, and you feel like complaining. That go back to that Matthew 25 and see what it does for you, because I know it helps me, it shakes me up. And does my heart say yes to God? You will seek me, God says in Jeremiah, and you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. So we have to be wholehearted and not halfway about stuff, because that to me, that's like in religious life, when somebody's schlepping as long as this Father Groeschel used to say, just going 25 miles an hour when you're in a 70-mile zone. That's sometimes that's a sign either that you're sick or that your heart is in the wrong place. It needs to get back where it belongs. And that's what we need to ask God for, this clarity and this this single-mindedness. So we're all called to this holiness. See, in Luke it says, Jesus says, love the Lord your God with your whole heart, your whole soul, your whole strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say love me halfway, love me this, just a quarter. It says the whole person. It's wholehearted. So St. Paul was our model for that. That because we know that once he.
Okay, how are you?
Can you mute yours? Let me put.
Okay, can you call me back, maybe?
Can you mute yourself?
Yeah, well, I can do it this afternoon. Why, are you busy?
Marlene, can you please mute yourself? So Paul said, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. He said, every day when we receive communion, Christ is really sacramentally living in me and you. And it's a great reminder that, we're not just living a human life here. We have the life of the Spirit of God in us. And we're called to fight evil in every form and strive to acquire virtue. And in the Pauline family, we're called to fight evil, especially that evil which is the result of the bad use of media. So we don't condemn media itself, we condemn the use of media. Because, years ago, people, I remember I was giving a catechetical workshop back in Rhode Island one day, and we, at that time, we had the old the predecessors of the DVDs, the big, uh, I can't remember the name of it, but now it's just so old. But a lady walked in the room to be one of the audience, and she looked at the pile of this media, and she went off in a huff that, you know, that we would dare to use something modern to teach kids with. And I just shook my head because I feel sorry for the kids she's teaching. Uh, anyway, we are called to sanctity, and it's not something weird because while we're having problems with this, getting into this Zoom, I was trying to pray to Blessed Carlo Nacutis. He was the young man who was a computer genius, and he organized vigils and prayers to Jesus in the Eucharist all through media. So he wasn't old enough to be a Pauline, but he was using the Pauline means of reaching souls. So Jesus reminds us that to come after him, we have to deny ourselves, take up our cross daily, and follow in my footsteps. Because that's where there's like a pinch here, because it's Christianity looks beautiful from the outside, but it's from the inside, that's where we have to take up the cross. Sometimes the first cross is usually ourselves, our own temperament, our own feelings, our own desires or lack of desire when we should be desiring the right thing, where we're, we're distracted by something else. So that's really a cross when we have to put up with ourselves first of all. And then there's somebody that might be annoying, but the first one is me that has to be put up with the grace of God. And we have the grace of the sacrament of reconciliation. And we have our right as a Christian, to receive these sacraments, and God has a right to hear from us every day. And we were talking about prayer. Our celebrant this morning was talking about prayer. He was saying even as a kid, and he was praying all the time, and because he is one of those that from childhood he wanted to become a priest, and he said that he was praying to God in his own way, but he was doing that like all his life already, and it shows because he seems to be a very fervent pastor right now. That Jesus in the Eucharist, it speaks to us in a very special way because he's their body and blood, soul, and divinity. And he's calling me and you to come to him in the Eucharist. And he reminds us, as the Father has loved him, he says, as the Father loved me, so I have loved you. And he's asking us to live in his love. And that's where we get the strength for that. Because now, we used to do a lot of door-to-door visitation. And I remember we were in outside of Galveston, Texas. And there was we were right by a pier where these fishermen from different places were there. And these two black fellas were talking to us. And then they said, how can you live without a man? and, and we said, well, with the grace of God. But then they shook their head. Yeah, that's true, with the grace of God. And that happened to be another time I was driving to South Carolina with my sister, my older sister. And since she was older than me, I was filling up the gas tank. But I had my habit on, and a lady in a pickup truck waiting to get gas, she comes up to me and she says, how can you live without a man? And I said, well, God gives you the grace for that. And because people don't think of God, there's the motivation is God, and he's the one who gives the grace. So the same with the gentleman, how can you live without a woman? It's the same story. God gives me the grace, and God fills my heart with a love for him that compensates for all the rest. And our founder tells us that all mankind, from the just Abel to the last man who will walk upon the face of the earth, all the angels put together, all the saints, will never give to God a glory so sublime and so worthy as that which is given him in the brief instance of the consecration and elevation of Holy Mass. So it blows my mind to think how blessed we are in the Catholic Church to have this real presence of Jesus. And Jesus assures us that he himself is the living bread come down from heaven. And he tells us, if anyone eats this bread, he shall live forever. So we have that promise, which is such an instigator for us. It's an inspiration, and it's a reason for being. Even, if we don't feel too healthy one day, we feel kind of dragged down physically, or even mentally worrying about this and that. And it's Jesus is giving us the ultimate source of strength, and we need to turn to him for that. And in order to do that, we have to get rid of a lot of our distractions. And then Paul reminds us, are you not aware that you and me are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? For the temple of God is holy, and you are that temple, you and me. And that's why we need to respect ourselves and to respect each other. And Jesus says, here I stand knocking at the door. If anybody hears me calling and opens the door, he says, I will enter his house and have supper with him, and he with me. And see, the other day, we had to congratulate Kathleen Kelly. She had a mass in her Lebanese Maronite parish in Thanksgiving for her 20 years of professed life as an Annunciationist. And during the mass, the priest reminded the folks that day, this past weekend, was the feast in the Maronite church of 3 young brothers. They were young adults. And it was during the Ottoman Empire, when there was a lot of persecution of Christians. And these Muslims actually entered their parish church, and they killed the priest, and they asked these 3 young men, we'll save your life if you become a Muslim. You give up this Jesus. And they said, and one of them answered, he said, God has been good to me. Jesus has been good to me all my life. And now I will not give up his believing in Jesus as my God. And the 3 of them were massacred. And they're blessed, especially in the Maronite religion, but they're an example to all of us. But I'll leave that there. I'm gonna try to get rid of this. This was someone else prepared this, so I can get rid. Okay, I'll just leave this here. That picture there. Okay, but I'm trying to shrink my. I'm having a hard time lately with this computer. But anyway, I wanted to reiterate the fact that we need to remind ourselves every day of our littleness, but also our call to holiness. Because I was going over some notes that I had from a directed retreat, and the priest called to mind the Psalm 27. And it says, one thing I ask of the Lord that I will seek after. I'll seek after this, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his holy temple. So some of us actually live in a cloister, so to speak, with other folks who have the same mind and same purpose. And you who are in the secular institutes are called to be this light and to, you have I think, a harder life in a sense because you don't have all the helps that we have. So, because at night, we close the door and we don't expect any visitors to come. But if you're living in a family, there's relatives that are coming up by, and or you have to provide materially for these people. So you have those worries, but God gives you the grace because there are so many saints in the church who were just like you. They lived at home, they lived with the family, they had to get a job and go to work every day and put up with folks at work who didn't understand their faith. So some of you are go through that, I think, because I don't know what you all do as an occupation, but I know that wherever you go, you are bringing Jesus with you, and that's the beauty about Father Alberione wanted everybody on board. That's why he started not only the orders of the priests, sisters, and brothers. He wanted the laity to be leaven for the whole universe. Because one thing about Alberione was he was this totality. He gave the whole, his whole self, and he wanted everybody else to be involved. So, and you are branches of this Pauline family. In fact, the other day we got a letter from our Mother General, and and she was mentioning the story of the Trappist monks. I believe it was in Morocco. It was in the Middle East there, and they were captured by a Muslim radical group and murdered. And I think one of them survived because he hid under his bed because they came at night to get these poor monks. And one of the ladies from the town where the monks were, because the monks had like a dispensary of medicine and things like that, they were helping the people, and the people really admired them. And and uh and this lady told it's one of the sisters who was interviewing her, you know, he said, your presence, the presence of the monks and the presence of your sisters, you're like the branches of a tree. And we're like the little birds who rest on you, who find their strength in you. And I tried to find a picture that went along with that. Can you see me? Because right now I can't see anybody, but there's a picture here, and it shows a little bird sitting on this one is actually a flower, but it kind of personified for me what we're talking about, because we that are consecrated to God are like this branch, and other folks rely on us to pray for them, to give a good example. And I thought that was a beautiful image, because that's what those people saw in the brothers who were working among them, and they should see that in us. There's that strength that we get from prayer, so they can rest in us in a sense. So I thought that was something that we can bring to mind, and this is something for everyday use. St. James, in his letters, he's kind of blunt, and he says to everybody that we should be quick to listen, but slow to speak and slow to human anger. And many times, humanly speaking, we're we're quick to speak and slow to listen. So that's kind of a resolution that we can add on to what that the Lord is asking from us during this retreat, to have that listening heart and ears, because sometimes there's so many times when people have gotten hot and bothered because they didn't wait to listen to what sometimes they don't let the person speaking even finish their sentence, and they pounce on them. And I've seen that happen in religious life too, because we're all human. But sometimes, because we did did a lot of door-to-door visitation and see a lot of things that they're not always edifying. And sometimes you see that people gets very short tempered, and the only way to avoid problems with them is just to keep your mouth shut, to keep quiet, because every word you say might be a kindling for to, to their the fire that's burning in them is going to get added to because of every word because they're not listening, they're just expounding. Because I notice that when if we're talking all the time, I mean, God doesn't have a chance to talk to us because we're trying to talk, you know. It and there are times like now on retreat we're asked to be quiet because I know that some of you can't get off of work, but you are trying to attend as much as you can, and so God makes plenty of room for that. He appreciates everything we do for him because the smallest act of love is registered to God. Remembers all that. So because a lot of people are afraid to die, they're afraid of their sins. You know, God says he wipes away our sins, like throws them in the ocean. And the nice part about living over here in Boston, we from our Belvedere, we have like a patio on top of the roof here, and you can see the ocean from here. And usually it's very tranquil, very quiet because it's in the Boston Harbor. And but it always reminds me of St. Catherine of Siena called Jesus our sea of peace. You know, when you feel hot and bothered or tired and cranky, you know, just think of that. Picture that tranquil ocean, and that's God absorbs us into His peace. So ask for that because it works. I'm telling you because you know I'm very Irish, and we're Irish are known to have a hot temper. So I have to admit sometimes I I can feel that match because you know, our founder was hot tempered, and when he was a young seminarian, they called him the matchstick because he was so flammable. He was so he had to work on that for a long time. So probably even when he was elderly, because I met him in Derby a while back when I was a junior professed. It was my first assignment outside of Boston was in Buffalo, and the founder was visiting in Derby, or the fathers were, and we asked him to come to Buffalo. I said, "Oh no, no, he's too weak to come." You know, so we sisters had to go out to Derby to, with our priest had a seminary in an apostolate set up. But the founder was very open to us. He did not speak English, and my Italian was minimal, and but each one of us got a chance to see him personally, and and he was. You know, I tried to tell. He asked me a few questions, and he realized I was American. So, because he asked me if I was happy in America, then he realized, oh, no, you're not Italian. You're American, and then I I asked him to bless him because they said ask for a blessing. So he gives this little blessing with his thumb on my forehead, and I said no, please, here on my hard head. It said that in Italian, qui sulla testa dura, and and he did. He traced the big sign of the cross on my head and patted me on the head, and then he sat back and laughed. You know, so I have that. The mark of my history there that I made the founder laugh, but I also he gave me a blessing, and hopefully it's lasted till today, because you know he was very much a man of prayer, but he was also aware of what was going on around him, and that's why he started so many groups of people to meet the needs that were cropping up all over the place. So that's why Blessed Alberione, we hope soon will be Saint Alberione, because he had this worldwide vision that, and he probably had more to start before he died, because he had so many things. He was like a volcano with all these ideas rushing forward, you know, and it was burning with the love of God and souls. And he also had a good sense of humor, because, when the Society of St. Paul first started, they were accepting young men from 11 years old up, and and some of the fathers that are around today, like Father Guido and Father Colacry, they entered when they were 11 years old, and they're still with us. But Father Alberione, we had some of these kids were like 10, 11 years old, and some of them are pranksters at that age, So he would he would gather them in a big hall, because, or rather gather them in church when they needed to get advices, as they called it, and he would go in another room and then get himself all worked up. It's very strict, because he said in private, if I go out there and watch their faces, I start laughing. This was our holy founder, so he had a sense of humor, and and probably when people talked to him personally, they caught on to that, because he wasn't a robot of holiness. He was a real person who he understood folks, and also, but he did demand real obedience. Like, if somebody kind of hemmed and hawed, and he said, when we want to send you to America, he would just say, okay, we'll get somebody else, because he had no time to waste. So, and that's an attitude we should have, that we want to do God's will right away, not put it off, because it's something I find in myself. Sometimes, I know something has to be done, and I don't want to do it, but then when I do finish it, I get that satisfaction, and that's, I don't know if any of you are ever tempted like that, but I am. You know, procrastination. So we ask that God will help us in all our needs, and and we have to join our poverty to God. And as people who are consecrated, we have the vow of obedience, chastity, poverty. But poverty, as Pauline's, is not deprivation. We don't have to go around in bare sandals and the same clothes every day. And we have to be minimal in what we need, so we don't waste a lot of time and money in helping ourselves to stuff. But the founder's idea of poverty was using time very well, and using what we have, you know, and building up and saving, because he would say to people that each one of us professed sisters and brothers and priests, we have to work not only for ourselves, but for another person coming up the pike, as they say. We need to provide for each other. And then we also have to save what we can, preserve what we can, not wreck it up. And even the cars and all that, we have to make sure that they get their oil and gas when they need it, and things like that. But that's a wise poverty. You're saving for the future when you take good care of what you got, and and uh and you save the money you have for good things. But you're not, as the Italians say, spiloch, means stingy. He wasn't stingy, and so many of our superiors were always, when we left for a trip somewhere, they would give us what we need, and some extra too, because in case something came up. So it's poverty is something that it's being attached to stuff, because sometimes every once in a while have to go through what we have and kind of get rid of stuff, because when we die, somebody else is going to go in our rooms and have to clean out everything. And we want nothing to keep us from God, because I remember visiting a lady was near Cape Cod, and she had a nice little house and nice china. And she said, "Oh, I can't give this away." She's like in her 80s already, but she wasn't thinking that one of these days you're going to leave this stuff. And, I don't know how I can't give this away. I can't get myself, but in other words, you couldn't be detached, but we got to be detached for the love of God, before in the end, we're going to get detached, whether we like it or not, because we're going to be in the presence of God forever. But that's when we think of those last things. So yesterday we went over the last things: death, judgment, heaven, hell. But it's the death part that's very evident to us. We watch the news about the Ukraine and all the deaths happening there. They have these mass shootings here, and then friends that we know pass away. And in my own life, I've had in the last couple of years, had 5 siblings pass away, and most of them it was very quick. Only one sister died of cancer, and that was quite prolonged. She suffered a lot, but God was very good to her. And one of our priest friends was very faithful in bringing her to sacraments. But it's the idea that we're working for God and living for God, and it's not a business transaction, but it's a father, daughter, son, and father, and brothers and sisters together. We're all the children of this loving Father, and He doesn't let anything happen to us that He doesn't care about. And that's why we have to give ourselves wholeheartedly to God, and go over those vows that we made and see they're not supposed to be iron things that keep us stuck in one place. Instead, they have to be a way of freedom, freeing us from things we don't need and letting us use our talents for God and for the church, and to grow in love. So I think I said enough for this morning. You all think so? Because I can keep going on and on, but I don't want to do that. And I think I have said enough for us to think about, that Jesus' way, truth, and life is hopefully He's speaking to us, we know. So we want to see what we can get from what we said. And try to be that strong branch that others can rely on. Okay. Can you see that again? You all see it? Yeah. Okay. So have a blessed rest of the morning, and we'll see you again, God willing, at 4 o'clock Eastern time. Have a blessed day. Thank you.
Thank you, sister.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sister.
sister.
Thank you, sister. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hi, Father. So I'm going to say goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Good
Father.
to see you, Father Matt. Thank you. See you.
God bless.
God bless.
Bye, guy.